7 p.m. and I declare the meeting open. The town of Walkerville would like to acknowledge the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on today and respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We recognise the many generations of stewardship that Kaurna people have provided to this land and respect that their cultural heritage and beliefs are as important today as they were for their ancestors. Everyone is present tonight. We have no apologies. Leave of absence. Are there any leave of absence? Councillor Ashby did request a leave of absence at the Walkerville Oval Redevelopment Committee meeting on the 26th of August, and that was amended to the 9th of September 2021. That's when you were going, is that right? No, oh sorry, my mistake. And it was amended on the 9th of September, so those two meetings. But your leave of absence would commence on the 4th of October to the 26th of October? Was it the 4th or the 5th, or did it come forward or go back?
Madam, I think it's the 5th.
It was originally the 5th and then it was amended to the 4th. But
okay. Well,
right. Okay, fine. That's right. So therefore, Councillor Ashby is seeking, because it has to, for council, a leave of absence from the 4th of October to the 26th of October, inclusive. Is there anyone else that are wishing to put in a leave of absence? No. Would someone move that that leave of absence be approved? Thank you, Councillor Wilkins. Second, Councillor Joshi. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Confirmation of the minutes. The ordinary meeting held on the 16th of August and the special council meeting held on the 15th of September 2021 have been circulated with the agenda papers. Would someone move that they both be confirmed as a true and accurate record of the proceedings if they believe that's the case? Thank you, Councillor Bishop. A seconder, please. Councillor Coleman. All those in favour? Thank you, carried. Are there any declarations of interest? Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Frigga.
Councillor Williams.
I was a little hesitant to declare a perceived conflict of interest at the last meeting in relation to the boundary. Hang on, take that off.
You may, because you're speaking.
To the boundary changes. Although I have property in Vale Park, and I think other members also may have declared a perceived conflict of interest as well. And I'm quite happy to declare it again. However, I don't actually feel as though I have any conflict of interest at all in relation to the boundary changes, given that we all own property within the Walkerville area. I own property in both Walkerville and Vale Park, and because it affects so many hundreds of people, I don't actually see how I actually have a conflict at all. So I'm not sure. I'm happy to declare a perceived one.
Can you just declare a perceived one?
I think, Your Worship, I think the reason I may have raised it with Councillor Williams, and that was driven because Councillor Wilkins had raised a perceived interest because he lived in his property in Vale Park. I think that was what drove me to ask.
But at the time you said, I don't think you need to declare it due to the fact that it affects hundreds
Correct,
of people.
but because you mentioned it,
okay.
and I just wanted to get it on the record so that we could make it clear that they're perceived and there's generally no...
Because it's affecting so many.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it was just because of uniformity and making sure that, does that make sense?
Well, that's fine. I don't have any doubt that I have no conflict of interest at all, but yet at the same time I'm still quite happy. I think it's silly, once you've declared one once, to then to decide to not declare it,
yes.
I think is not a good idea. So it's not going to change anything that I do in relation to the discussion or the debate, so I'm quite happy to declare a perceived interest, but I just wanted to mention that as well. I don't believe there is one.
Coleman as well.
Sorry, Councillor Coleman.
Should I declare it? I don't have to declare it.
So you got our part too.
I think, Your Worship, again, it was those who declared interests in the past and just following through as a perceived interest. That's all it is. I think it's my view of this is that I think it's important for the residents to know on matters such as this where the ownership, where people live. It's a question that's asked of me regularly when decisions of council are made. Classic case in point, at the public meeting we had last week in relation to the code amendment, I was asked by a number of residents which of the elected members lived in Medindi. It's a perception of our community. They want to know where the elected members live in terms of when they make their decisions. So it's just, I think it's fair and reasonable, and at the end of the day it is nothing more than a perceived. It doesn't change. You don't have to exit the meeting.
So, sorry, man. So it's not. I wouldn't say it'd be just for the people living in Vale Park. Obviously, and I live in Walkerville.
Yeah.
That's part of the boundary issue, isn't it? So.
No, because it's not affecting. You're not changing. Walkerville's not changing.
But I'd be. But I've got views about the alignment. So I do have strong views about it. So I mean, I'm
Everyone has
resident.
three.
So
We
I
all
think
have
it is.
views, but
Yeah, it's about ownership.
it's not actually affecting
Yeah.
your ownership because you already live here. You already live in Walkerville. It's whether
Depends out how your view is on whether it's.
well,
We
but
never
your starting
the comments
point is,
in the.
but
the
your
comments in
starting
the,
point is Walkerville.
All right, well, I'm happy not to declare, but I'll
And of
try.
course, our property ownership is all in our ordinary returns.
Correct.
Anyway,
Yes,
Correct.
that's right. Okay, it would.
Oh, Your Worship, I'd like to declare an interest
Yes.
in item 19.2. My interest is a section 120 under the Local Government Act, as the matter relates to my performance review.
Thank
And
you.
I will be exiting the meeting and will not participate in the discussions.
And I'm sorry, Mayor, I should also have said to Danielle that I intend to remain in the room and vote and
Well,
vote on
perceived, so yes,
yeah,
yes.
vote on the matter
Same
and
as
participate
Councillor
in the vote.
Coleman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Thank
then
you.
I guess Norm and I should do the same.
Yes,
Danielle.
it's the three: Councillor Williams, Councillor Coleman, and Councillor Wilkins. And after you've put the boundary realignment, you could perhaps say, and they will participate. They will stay in the room and participate in discussion. Because it's only been received and noted at this stage. Okay, thank you. There are no deputations, representations or presentations. We now move on to agenda item 5, the Mayor's Diary. Does anyone have any questions regarding the Mayor's Diary or wish to seek clarification? No, it's a busy month. Would someone move that it be received and noted? Thank you to Councillor Wilkins. A seconder, please. Councillor Bishop, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Reports from elected members. Has anyone attended trainings, conferences or seminars? I don't believe they have. No. Reports from elected members having attended subsidiary board meetings. Councillor Bishop, a special board meeting for Era Water on the 20th of August. Is there anything you wish to note for the council to be...
The only thing that was...
Do you want to wish to take off the mask?
Thank you. First of all, the board is more active and more functional than it has ever been. I am extremely pleased with our new chair, Jeff Tate. I think he's going to turn it around, the Era Water around. And I think Wally, forgive me, yes, is excellent and very, very proactive. One of the discussion points, and it was skimmed over, but I think it's very exciting, is that they have developed an interactive program that is going to enable them to see immediately whether we or the person requesting access to the water pay for the connection. So there's always been this who will pay, and there's never been a sort of a mathematical formula to enable us to see what the payback is going to be and in what length of time. And by putting in that data, they'll know immediately who's going to pay for the connection. So yes, that's very exciting. But as for the meeting this coming Wednesday night, I haven't seen what they're going to present yet, which I think is a new...
That's a pretty thing for all the councillors.
About how they're going to finance themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's exciting. Thank God, that's all I can say.
Wonderful to hear. Any other members attend a subsidiary board meeting? Yes, Councillor Menke.
Thank you, Mayor. Both myself and Councillor Coleman attended our first EHA meeting on the 8th of September. I took a few notes, just I suppose the points of interest. I think it was item 5.3 or something, which identified, it was discussion about the long-term financial plan. There was a little bit of discussion around that. I think it was Councillor Hammond from Campbelltown, Michelle Hammond from Campbelltown, identified savings from about year 2 onwards where there is no longer a repayment of borrowings. This is due to a previous agreement requiring EHA to fund the fit out of their current premises, and that will be their final payment will be next year. So EHA have from the next year repaid that debt. So there was a little bit of discussion how that will likely present a slight reduction in fee because it will obviously be spread across the 5 councils in their annual administration contributions. I went through their risk register. There was some questions around COVID vaccinations, whether their staff are vaccinated. The CEO commented that it was an informal thought and it wasn't declared. The staff don't actually formally say whether vaccinated or not, but he feels the majority are. But as far as whether there was whether staff had to be vaccinated in the future, the CEO explained that this would be an industrial question, I think, with most organisations.
Particularly people that are getting COVID and are suing their employer. That happened today.
Okay, pass me on that one. Under 5.6, I actually put my name forward and was supported to sit on the CEO Performance Review Committee, which is interesting given our current situation. However, should whatever the future has, I'll withdraw if that's the case. But at the moment, I was just trying to make myself have some presence on the board.
Well, you're there for 12 months.
Sorry?
You're there until June next year.
That's right, yeah. What else
How
we
long
got
is the term as a member of the committee?
Sorry?
How long is the term as a member of the committee?
I believe it's...
To the election.
To the election,
To
exactly.
the
To the
election.
general election.
Yeah.
Your
Just
worship.
after. Just after the June 30.
That's it. What else we got here? There was a little bit of talk also that in the last financial year there were 16 businesses across the spread of councils that 16 businesses were closed down due to food audits. Normally every year there's only approximately 4, so this is up considerably. A common observation was that it was to do with lots of vermin and cockroaches in kitchens, etc. The staff don't feel that's a COVID excuse because they tried to blame COVID because the business next door could still control their vermin and cockroaches. It was still obviously the individual businesses want to sort of control those issues. But that was interesting. That was 4 times the amount.
Important to think about.
Councillor Kennedy from Campbelltown thought maybe that's due to the weather, there was more rain, therefore more vermin. What else we got? There was a little bit of commentary around the staff. The last comment was there was a review of the current staff structure at EHA, and there was a comment, there was, I got 9 staff plus, so we got 9 staff plus the CEO. The 9 staff combined had around about 100 years of experience, and this was thought to demonstrate a well-resourced team with some long-term staff members. There were 5 employees having more than 7 years experience, and that's excluding the CEO. And the last item on the agenda was a motion of notice which I submitted, where I requested that recommendation 1 of a recent service review, which regarding the revised fee structure be brought forward and be reviewed by the end of September by each member council. That was on the back of we'll get to this. I've got a motion notice here as well, but very much in brief, it was obviously we made a decision in May. In June, EHA presented they did an internal audit themselves, and one of the there's 12 recommendations, I think, and the first recommendation was to find more equity in the fee structure. I've spoken at length with the CEO about this. So given our situation, I really wanted to get some action on that. So I raised the motion on notice to see if we can get the other member councils to discuss that within their chambers. And so that will be happening. So that was supported unanimously. The board members were all keen actually on retaining our membership to EHA. But however, it's obviously not at the board level. It will obviously have to go to each chamber and have the support of each council. And yeah, so during that discussion, the CEO did provide some details regarding what the modelling would look like for the bigger councils, Burnside, Norwood, Payne, St. Peters and Campbelltown. Not so much Campbelltown, but definitely Burnside, Norwood, Payne, St. Peters. And obviously they will actually incur a greater fee. Prospect and Walkerville would benefit from a reduction, and Campbelltown was just they'd have a slight increase.
Well, that's all in the report.
That's all in the report, yes. Okay, and that's my
Thank you.
Can
summary.
I ask a question?
You may.
Councillor Nenke, as a board member, were you told of any of were the businesses that were closed because of their vermin, were any of them named for you?
No.
Did that not concern you?
No.
Did it not worry you that all 16 might be in Walkerville?
It's a good question, but I didn't actually think about that.
Why
Learning
not?
was my first
Okay.
board meeting, but so I was actually trying to take in as much detail as I could, typing madly, Councillor Bishop. However, so you know, I didn't actually think about whether it was all 16.
Well, that's one of my serious issues with that board.
I'd be happy to take it up with them, though.
Absolutely, you won't get anywhere, but it's one of my serious issues because they never ever divulged, and I would, I can understand.
Just explain, whilst you were on EHA.
Yes, while I was on EHA, they could have. No, I'll go one step further. We got into such strife. EHA got into so much trouble that there was a major legal altercation. Lawyers and QCs all involved, and the board had no idea that this was happening. So one of my serious issues with that subsidiary of ours is the fact that they do not give the directors or the board members any information. And if this issue arose in Prospect, and Prospect had no idea, so I could not see any justification. They could not tell the rest of the board members, but it would have been kind to have let the Prospect board members know, so that when it hit council, those board members were ignorant.
Okay. No,
And
I'll
we've
take it
had
on board.
scenarios here in Walkerville where EHA have been dealing with issues and not let council know. So I have some serious issues
That's
about
fair
that
enough.
board.
Do they have
Look,
directors'
I'll
insurance?
Sorry, Your Worship.
Do they have directors' insurance?
They're covered under our mutual liability scheme, Your Worship.
No, if they're a director,
No, they're a subsidiary of a council.
I see, so
Because
that's
they're a
our
subsidiary of a
insurance.
council, so it's
Is it
covered under the
legal?
mutual
It's legal.
liability scheme.
Because they're a director of a board, and therefore they're a director of that board, they're not actually representing Walkerville or whichever council. That's why I asked the question, if you have directors' liability insurance, because in that instance where you don't know and the administration is operating independently without informing the board of what's going on, it's in business, it's actually leaving
Correct.
every board member very exposed. So what it is, it's leaving our council exposed. So we then have to go and use our own public liability insurance because they could be caught up.
But under this arrangement...
Just that's something that,
yeah,
that just is a way of explanation for all board members. When you are on a subsidiary, you are a subsidiary, you are representing, you are on that board not as a representative of the council, you're on there independently. We nominate you to sit on that board. You are on nomination.
So that would
You-
apply to East Waste with all the
Yes.
issues at the moment as
yeah,
well.
So,
Yep.
And just through your worship,
Subsidiaries
just,
sound a little bit, why are we going down that?
just to be
Right.
clear though, members, please don't stress out or panic. You're covered.
that's why I thought
So
I better ask the question.
every
Yes.
subsidiary of councils is fully covered under the mutual liability scheme.
Yeah.
So the provisions that sit around this table are exactly the same provisions as those that sit as a board member of a subsidiary.
But
So you
they
have full
have to be,
indemnity.
I think
when
I'd
you
agree
think
with
about
that.
it, you have to be aware of it,
Yes.
so that you are, because otherwise if you actually, went home and thought about it and then thought, gosh, given what Councillor Bishop was saying, you could then, I would go home and think about it and then get worried. That'd be financially exposed, but it's important that we are clear that you are covered by us, by our,
With
Yes. Yeah.
with Councillor Bishop's concerns, I would actually like the opportunity to take that to EHA.
Absolutely.
So I didn't write it down, but maybe if I have a chat to you later, so we can get
I
some wording
asked.
around it.
When I was on the board,
Mhm.
I always asked because
Mm.
there were other restaurants that were being closed and they would never tell us,
Mhm.
ever, saying it was not our business, basically. I
Yeah.
thought it seriously was our business, even if they dealt with it in confidential matters, which is how it should have been dealt with. Sorry, I've got my
No,
notes still.
I like
But I felt that we were very exposed, and for it to, I also feel that that board should be reporting or be more open to the councils that they're representing, especially on some of these very sensitive issues.
Yeah, look, I'll check it out. But when I worked for, I say I worked for Walkerville, I do remember even internally, there was no discussion about even businesses that staff would even eat at, because you can't be disclosing information on open cases. So I would
So
like
what
to, I'd like to, I mean, I don't know,
Can
I'm
we
not a
discuss
lawyer, I
some of
haven't
this
really got,
offline,
yeah, and that's
please?
it, I haven't actually got the answers, but I would like, I'll speak to you after,
Sure.
get some words, and I'll take it to EHA and I'll report back next meeting.
Absolutely.
Councillor Ashby, you have a
Yeah, just a
question?
question, Your Worship. So EHA operates under the same charter conditions as East Waste?
Yes, or
Yeah.
similar.
Through
They
your
have their own
worship, the
charters.
charter is completely different, councillor. So the charter for EHA is its own charter, and the charter for East
But
West
they
is its
both
own.
work under a
But
charter.
they both work under the mutual liability scheme, so they're covered under the mutual liability scheme. But the two charters, there's no comparison.
Well, so East Waste basically operates under a company structure,
No, it operates under its charter.
under its charter.
Yes, under its charter. Every subsidiary
yeah,
operates
So
under a
the
charter.
responsibility issue is the same for EHA as East Waste.
Correct, councillor. So nobody on any board needs to be
No, I'm
concerned.
not concerned, but I just
Because you're
want to clear
fully
up my mind.
indemnified, you're fully covered by the mutual liability scheme, the local government mutual liability scheme. So it's no different to the coverage you get as an elected member.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Fricker. Just a question to the CEO, sort of following on between Councillor Bishop and Councillor Nemke's discussion. Do you know whether with EHA the reason we don't have that reporting, whether or not it's because they don't or because they can't?
Or what? Through your worship,
Right.
is this the report, the June review that EHA undertook themselves?
No, I was just wondering because when we're talking about specific businesses,
Oh, right,
it may
businesses.
well be in the situation they're talking about. It may well be that for privacy reasons they may not be able to. So that's what I'm saying. Whether there's a difference between whether they can, they may not be able to, or whether they can and they don't.
Through your worship, we used to get the information.
Okay.
And the information stopped coming, and the information stopped coming on the basis that EHA administration informed our administration that it was privacy issues. That, in my mind, doesn't stand true. We've received confidential information from every other subsidiary where we have requested it, and obviously when we receive information of a confidential nature, it stays within our realm.
Yeah.
But it's about understanding and knowing. So we're not alone. No other council on EHA receives specific data in relation to inspections that are undertaken. And as I say, that changed a couple of years back, and I can't tell you the exact time, but we certainly used to receive that information.
That was
from them.
before Councillor Bishop and Councillor Shetler were on
On the
GEHA,
board.
so that would have been before 2014.
Actually, the year that I joined, the first year is to give us that information. In fact, to
yeah.
that extent that even the chairperson used to call up one of the workers if he wanted to go to a restaurant, and she would tell him if this was okay to go
Yes,
or
that's
not,
true.
unofficially. And he actually mentioned this in the meeting. And then I don't know what happened. Then after that, the following year, one fine day, they said we can't give you this information. So obviously something happened in there that, and they said the charter has been reviewed and we cannot disclose the premises to you. But every place was actually mentioned to us.
Listed.
In the
Well, it
first year.
wasn't before.
So it was mentioned on the first day that I joined. I don't know what happened after that.
I think the argument is, or the question is, what is supposed to happen? So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
let's just get to that
Yes,
level of
yes.
detail.
Thank you for your answer, CEO. I'm confident, Councillor Nick.
Yeah.
Okay, so you
Yep.
finished your report.
Done.
Thank
Yep,
you very
thank
much.
you.
Right, questions from the gallery, CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship. As of 5 o'clock this afternoon, there was no questions received by administration from the gallery.
Thank you. Questions without notice? Members, are there any questions without notice? Right, I'll move on to questions on notice. There are none. Petitions? There are none. Motions without notice? Members, are there any motions without notice? No? Right, we move on to motions with notice, and that's the review of services provided to EHA to the town of Walkerville from Councillor Nenke. Councillor Nenke, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, and would you like me to read it as well? Is that the normal process?
Well, you may read it, yes, if you wish, and then just
For the
Give-
public, Your
for the,
Worship.
Yeah, I
for the
think
public, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I was
And
wondering
then,
what normal-
then give your explanation after that.
Okay,
please.
yeah. Okay, so item 13.1, review of services provided by EHA to Town of Walkerville. With regard to the May 21 confidential item 19.1, review of services provided by EHA to Town of Walkerville, administration is requested to present further information in a report at the November 2021 meeting. The report is to detail the feasibility and costings of all options available to Council to best deliver the environmental health service. The recommendations to this report is to include an option to take relevant action to rescind the existing resolution, along with alternative options presented based on the findings detailed within the report. Full stop. Just very briefly, I suppose the reason I'm raising this is, and I've spoken to the CEO throughout this whole process. When I reflect back on the May decision, and I mean it's a confidential item, so I'm not really sure how much I can really say, but it was supported by a review.
Sorry, Your Worship, if I could just interject. Councillor, you're okay to talk about
Okay.
it because Council's made its decision, we've notified the parties, so it's now public that the decision was made. So you can
Thank
talk
you.
about it.
Thank you. Yeah, so look, they're supported by a report by BRM, and that was made in May. And then just in June, at the same time, EHA were actually finalising a report, an internal review of the subsidiary, and that came out mid-June, 2 or 3 weeks after our decision in May. So, and I thank the CEO for standing it through to both myself and Councillor Coleman to have a read, obviously because we were going to probably be it was identified on the minutes maybe from the previous EHA meeting. So that review, when I read through that, I found it was quite interesting because I feel that a lot of the questions around were both service levels of service received at the town of Walkerville, but also it was inequitable, the fee structure, and that's absolutely agree. However, the recommendation one looked at the administration component, and there'll be a fixed and a variable rate to that component, and it will ultimately reduce council's fee by 28%, the non-variable part is obviously the services that incur within Walkerville. But ultimately, the fee of
That was what was in the report, but written by the consultant.
Yep, healthy environs. That's correct.
It's not a given. That's what.
No,
was
no,
in the
and that's
report.
what I'm getting at. Okay, so.
I just wanted to seek clarification.
Yep.
For the rest of, I'm aware of it because I've read the report, but I want to seek clarification for the other members.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. So there was a recommendation only at this stage. So it's all about the timing of this matter because we have already provided advice to EHA and the subsidiary members that we will be withdrawing from EHA. And what I was concerned about was obviously notification to the Minister, which I've asked to see if we can just hold off because under the Act it doesn't look like there's any, it's not real clear on the time requirements around that. So what I've asked EHA, the board members at the last meeting, was whether we could at least ask the question as to whether recommendation 1 would be supported from the subsidiary board members, because it has to be unanimous. If it's not unanimous, then we have effectively withdrawn from EHA. If they do, however, come back and approve the new fee structure, and therefore there is an opportunity to have a 28% fee reduction, I would like to investigate that for where that might have this elected board's consideration looking forward. And the reason for myself particularly to be thinking along these lines is when I think back to our discussion in May and the details that were provided at that time, I'm not 100% sure whether, I mean not myself, I'm not really understanding what the new fee structure to this council will be. I don't really know what services will be provided and how they'll be provided. For example, how will the immunisation be conducted? Will we talk of having an internal resource? Will it be at 0.2, 0.4, 0.5? I'm not sure. How will the support, what's the agreement with our supporting council? What will happen if there's a change in structure of that supporting council in the future? A new CEO comes in and changes the structure. Where does that leave out this council in the environment? I'm not sure what other providers there are out there. I don't think there's a heap of alternative options. We could probably go to another council, but again, it's going to be continual negotiation of terms. So look, I just want to, what I'm asking for in this motion is just to ask an apples for apples type report where we can, as a board, look at comparison of what we will be seeking from the new model that we're investigating compared to what we know at EHA. And I suppose by November, I believe the CEO will be in a pretty strong position to have our agreement discussed with our supporting council. We'd also understand what sort of hours we'd be looking for an internal resource, and alternatively we'd also know whether we'd be receiving a 28% reduction in the fee structure in the charter. So that's all I'm asking, is that we can just have a report to compare. If the council still at that point continues down with the May decision, then albeit that's great and I'll support it 100%. However, if we do have a report that may raise some questions, I think it's our duty as elected members to consider that, because once we are without EHA, and I think we open ourselves up personally. It's the environmental health service is it's a very broad. It's not just looking at kitchens. It's more than that. It's also having dealing with people with mental health, having hoardings. It's immunisations, schools as well, and if we I would also like to know how we can deliver that service with an in-house 0.2, 0.4, and how we'll have that sort of support mechanism from the supporting council. I just want to know how it all works before we continue. And that's all I'm asking in this motion. I hope, for the sake of information, I can have that support from this board here. Thank you.
Would you like to move? Stephen, move that?
Absolutely.
Yes. Now we have a seconder. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Won't rehash over everything that Councillor
Do you
Nick
want
is.
to take off your mask? It's just easier to hear
It's a good idea
and better
for
for
them
the
self-talk.
Yeah.
Won't go over too much of what Councillor Necky's already gone on about, but in essence we went to that meeting with an open mind, and I think our eyes were opened as to some of the mistakes that have been made there. Well, I consider them mistakes. We put a letter of resignation to stand down in May this year, and in June they put out a publication. Well, not the ER, but the what do they call them? MB.
Health
Consultant.
environment. Health environment.
So put a report out showing the anomalies in some of the charges, and it affected all the councils, not just what we're looking at. But as far as Walkerville's concerned, the part that concerned us was what I saw was a 28% reduction, which equates to about $28,000, which is
Not quite that much.
not, was it 23,000, I
21,
think.
I think, from memory.
It was a considerable amount based on what our yearly fee is.
$21,000
$21,000,
and $41 to be precise,
All right.
councillors. Yeah.
So I thought that's worth looking at, not something you just walk away from in a hurry. So hence this motion to look at not only what we've currently got and maybe reconsider it, but also have a look at the new proposal in more depth.
Are there any questions of the motion before we discuss the motion? You wish to ask a question? Are you wishing to speak to the motion or speak against? Before
I was going
I'll start again. Do you wish to speak for or against the motion, or are you wishing a point of clarification?
I was going to. I've got several questions, and it was a question I was going to ask,
Right.
but it's an esoteric one. Why would the other councils vote to have their fees increased so that Walkerville can have theirs decreased?
Well, I thought that's pretty obvious. What's going to happen is that they'll be paying more.
Correct. And so why would they wouldn't do that so our fees are decreased? We're out, as far as I'm concerned. We're out.
I think personally, I think there is an eastern relationship with our councils. We have East Waste and the quarry as well. Is that? Yeah, that's something else as well. Yeah.
That's a couple of the others, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean there is a relationship over this side of town, and that's something else that I think a council of our size should be strongly considering as well, how we do support each other. But also, as I put in the wording of my motion at the board meeting, was and it was highlighted within their own agenda as well, that should there be, if Walkerville was to withdraw and is a loss of service, then it may actually, from a staffing point of view, they might have to look at whether they reduce the staff number or two. So, and then obviously that may impact the other councils with their service provision to them as well. So that's the point I'm trying to push.
I have another question. Just before I came onto the EHA board, they lost Unley. And prior to that, they'd lost the City of Adelaide. Do you not think that EHA, and now they're going to lose Walkerville, that EHA should be looking at themselves? They've lost 3 councils in the period of, I'd say, 10 years.
The City of Adelaide is probably an interesting one, given this, what the city is.
They
Unley's
just did, I think they did the immunisations for the City of Adelaide.
Okay, so it's just immunisations.
Yes, and City of Adelaide, and I'm open to be corrected on this, sought to get it elsewhere because it was cheaper. Unley were very dissatisfied with the service. And what shocks me is that EHA still doesn't look at themselves to work out what's wrong. The other issue I have with EHA is that they are not proactive, and we have a COVID disaster going on around us. And are they out immunising? Now, I know that that's a Commonwealth thing. Did they put their hand up right at the beginning? No.
I think their priority is actually the Eastern Councils first and
Really?
foremost.
So we all have to line up?
But they can't. From my understanding, Councillor Biccioni did this last time, I'm not sure that they actually could. It's beyond, it's a
Really?
state.
They give immunisations?
Unless we actually know the answer.
I don't think they offered it to councils.
Yeah.
That's only what I think, and I don't know emphatically. Are there any other questions?
Sorry, can I also answer some of those?
Yes.
Sorry.
Look, I thought they'd been asked.
Yeah, talking about, like you said, I'm not even sure about City of Adelaide. Like you said, it could have just been immunisations. We don't, so that's, I'm not sure. Only don't know of it. But the report also was an independent report. It actually did. The other councils did provide them a high rating of satisfaction for their service levels. They also benchmarked across 4 other councils as well, which were unnamed. There was and again they benchmarked very well across them. So, and that is in all the service provisions. It's not just cost and immunisations, everything else that they do too. So, again, this is what I'm looking for in the report, and then that's what I'm asking. I'm not here to. I'm going to fight it to the point to get the report, okay? Because I just want the report. I'm not going to sit here and go on and bat for EHA. I just want to see what is the pros and cons of staying and going. Because at this point, I am just a bit concerned that if we do move from EHA, and I mean, you're asking questions about service levels. What happens if a service provided from the other council is not as good either? Where does that leave us? We don't know, and that's my question.
Couldn't be worse.
Well, it could, because it only takes a CEO change to look at their staffing structures over there and what their objectives are, and that could leave us high and dry. So that's why I would just like to make sure we have our risks identified and that everybody here can actually consider it.
Yes.
That's all.
I will say one thing, if I may, just for clarification, and I said that in my email to you. In the meeting in May, it wasn't just financial. The reasons why we exited.
Agreed.
Why we decided to exit. It was a lot was to do. We had for the other councillors, if they remember, it was quite an impassioned speech by the group manager, regulatory services and other things, Andrea, which was one of the precipitating reasons a lot of members voted against it. Councillor Wilkins.
Thanks, Mayor Frigga. Just one question, clarification.
Thank you.
Are we going to have the information? So EHA have obviously said there's potential savings, right? Are these actually being agreed to, or are they proposed, or are they
it's in the
whims
report.
and fancy, or
It's in the report.
So that hasn't actually been agreed. So we're going to be comparing something that potentially may occur versus something else that potentially may occur. I just want to make sure that we can going to end up comparing apples with apples, or we're going to have apples and oranges.
So what I've asked of the other councils is whether, sorry, it's ridiculous, doesn't it? Whether they can actually, will they support the fee structure as written? Okay, so we will know as of the end of September whether they accept that more equitable structure.
Not necessarily, Councillor Nenke, because what Councillor Nenke has asked is that the board members go back to their respective councils and ask. However, the council has to decide, the elected member body from the other councillors have to decide what they will and will not accept, but you've got to get it on the agenda. Now, we tend to turn things around pretty quickly here, but not every council does. They have, more pressing matters in other areas, so you cannot say, we do not know when the council will vote on it, so I can't tell you when we will know it.
So what I'm asking in November is for a report to be written. If the other councils don't put it on their agenda and it's not unanimous and we don't know by the end of, will be probably by mid-October by the time every council is met, then it'd be an easy, well, in that part of the report, it'd be easy. The CEO can actually just say, well, the fee structure is this, what it is today, and then we'll be comparing services by service. So it's not all about the fee; it's also about whatever risks as well. I don't want to lose that part of the discussion.
Councillor Williams, do you have a question, or do you wish to speak? This, if it's a question, it's got to be the last one. I'm going to start speaking to the motion.
Well, it's more as a question to the CEO, and for me, this is actually quite simple. Do we believe that in the report that could come back in November that we could have any different information or extra information to what we have at the moment? And the reason I ask that is quite simply because over the last couple of weeks, Council, in relation to the Scotty's Motel corner, had further information from heritage advisors, from traffic engineers. We had a public meeting that we listened to all of these different people, so we had further information which led to a course of a different, possibly a different decision being made. So I guess what I'm asking is if we believe that we're going to have more information coming back that could possibly lead to a different decision, I would support this.
Your Worship, to answer the question, the issue that I have, and I've shared this with Councillor Nenke, is I think the November date is too soon, and it's too soon for me for a number of reasons. One, I don't believe that all the councils, the remainder councils, will have considered the fee structure in time for me to be able to embed anything into a report. Secondly, the conversations we've been having with Charles Sturt have all but been put on ice because we've had a number of other urgent matters that have taken us away. Code amendment for Scotty's being one, a whole host of public consultation issues that we've been undertaking, the Bower Park realignment for another, and the parking has consumed a reasonable amount of my time. So I haven't been able to put any effort in exploring anything further with the proposed model that I was looking at with Charles Sturt, notwithstanding that Council resolved in May to bring an in-house service. My intention was to continue discussions with Charles Sturt because I felt the need to have a contingency model. In other words, if the officer, whoever the officer is that we employ, is not available, whether they're sick leave, whether they're on sick leave or annual leave, then we need to be able to maintain the service. So it was about having a backup service from Charles Sturt, and we'd already commenced those discussions. I don't know that I'm going to have the full detail, the extent of the information that Councillor... Sorry, Councillor.
I'm happy to change that date.
Yeah. So they're the conversations
comes back to that. When does the minister, as we've discussed that,
yeah.
When does the minister need to know? And if we can, I'm happy to leave it till February, whatever it might be.
And I think Councillor Nenke knows that my position on the availability of information. Will there be any additional information? I don't know. I don't know, because it's going to come down to what are the member councils going to agree to do. If they don't agree to the fee structure, I don't have any other options to present to you.
That's it.
Unless we go back to the marketplace to see if there's anybody else interested. But Council's already resolved to bring it in-house. If we do know the outcome of the councils, that's stage one. Stage one is, do you accept the fee structure? Stage two will be, will you agree to keep Walkerville as a member? Because we've withdrawn, we will need their unanimous resolution to allow us back in. I've sought some legal advice on this whole situation in terms of the rescission or the revoking a decision of council whereby a whole series of things have to happen, which I've shared with Councillor Nenke, my questions that I put to our legal representatives. I haven't got that information back at this point in time. And obviously any information will be embedded in any report should council resolve that way. So
again, I just want to bring back the report to come back to council. What I'm also asking is, what is the agreement with Charles Sturt, and what are we going to do? What will we be doing with our internal resource? How are we going to satisfy the regulatory requirements of the Act? And that's what I don't know yet, and I don't think anyone actually could wholeheartedly put their hand up and say that they do know that. I'm asking that if the member councils don't provide that support, then that's fine. Like, that's it. That's dead and buried. I respect that. But if they do, I think we need to be in a position to at least to consider the report, so that we are in that position to consider our future. Anyway, well, I'm happy to put it to the vote.
Okay, if no one wishes to speak against the motion, so I'll put it to the vote then. All those in favour of the motion as it is?
The time frame, shouldn't we change
Oh,
that?
sorry.
The time frame,
Yeah,
that's what it is at the moment.
I'm happy to change that.
Your Worship, given that you've sort of put it to the vote, whilst you haven't concluded the vote, if Councillor Nenke and the elected member body, if you leave it at November, and if I don't have any further information to present, I will bring an information report back to Chamber
I think that's
to
what
say, I've got nothing else, I'm still waiting for information from the
I
councils.
think that would be much better
Would that be
than
acceptable?
leaving it just till February or something like that.
That's
So
right.
keeping everyone in.
So if we keep it in November,
Yeah, I'm also interested in the Charles Sturt discussion too. So
yes, and I appreciate that,
Yeah,
Councillor. But if we keep it in November, the issue for me is a fulsome report. So if I'm not in a position to present a fulsome report that satisfies the resolution,
Yep.
it may very well be that you'll get an information report saying we're still waiting on information from the following, and therefore it may be
with the option to extend.
December or January or February.
That's right. That's right.
So all those in favour, could you just put your hands up again, please? Right, carried. Thank you. Excellent. 14.2 policy, the Community Fund Program Policy Review. You've received the papers. Are there any questions regarding the papers? Sorry. My peripheral vision is renowned to be hopeless. So glad you leant right forward. Thank you, Fiona. Can you just make a comment?
Through you, Mayor. After writing this report and it going up, on reflection, with one of the alterations on page 36, top paragraph, where we've said with 10% of travel costs paid from the community fund up to $300 per annum, I would like to add or as determined by council, because it may be a special, more specialised national event or something that you may decide to say, look, I might like to go to 500. I just wondered whether I should add that, those words to the policy.
Yes, I would. Does everyone agree? We just nod, or do we have to? Yes, we add those points, those extra lines. Can you put that in the motion then, please? You want to put in
that will be
one.
okay here. Amendments to the community of a technical break comma, which includes.
Yeah.
What number?
Or sorry.
No, sorry. What number? What clause? Sub-clause? Have you
It
got
doesn't.
numbers on them?
No.
It's what does the program support? It's the last dot point in what does the program support?
Which includes changes to allow for council discretion.
Okay.
That's all you have to say. Which includes changes to allow for council discretion. In setting a contribution.
Yes,
That's it.
for travel, wasn't it? For travel. Yeah, for travel.
It refers to
It could be for
travel
anything.
costs.
It could be for anything.
It could be anything though as well, Your Worship. So council may decide that it's going back to what you currently have, which is currently under your discretion. So say you've got up to maximum of $300 or anything else that you might want to determine or consider.
It might be that you might want to pay for the uniform
That's
for
right.
them or
Okay.
something, but
That's
it's
right.
just or as.
Yeah.
If everyone's happy and doesn't have any, yes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Fricker. I have a couple of questions. One that was also on page 36 at the top, and I think there might be, I've noticed there's a couple of places on the agenda, a little bit of copy-paste issue on the part at the end of the first paragraph of participated has memorial or heritage plaques.
Oh, no, that's part of the community fund policy, is my understanding. It also sits with the plaque policy, which is why that's there.
I read that on a number of occasions and thought that was just a copy and paste from the Wesleyan Cemetery or something like that.
No, it does sit with the
That's a
plaque
purchase that's
policy
clearly
as
a
well,
one-off,
and the
a memorial or
sponsorship.
heritage plaque. So it's because the other sentence is so long.
Yes.
Could be, as I say, I read it a few times, it just didn't quite make sense to me. And the other couple of queries that I had, also on the same page, where it says for individuals, funding amounts will be determined by council dependent on the age of the individual. So do we have any scale around that? So a particular value for particular age groups? Because in the policy we're just saying dependent upon the age of the individual. But if someone said, well, my son's 12, what does that mean I'm entitled to? So I didn't know whether there was whether council wanted to do that, whether they wanted to have an age scale there.
Those words in there.
And also it says if the event is being held locally, nationally or internationally with 10% of travel costs, which
Locally's been removed.
which we've just spoken about. Yeah, well, the other thing with locally is it depends on how you define locally as well, because SAPSASA, for instance, may travel within the state to Port Lincoln or Mount Gambier. I'm not sure whether when we're talking nationally, or there may be a national event held in Adelaide, are they still entitled, where perhaps interstate might be better than nationally, if that's our intention.
Through
Yes.
you, Mayor, that's it. There's lots of different things that would then change. The reason that held locally wasn't included was because it was more about supporting individuals in more of a national championship competition space. I can say interstate if you prefer that to nationally.
I think it's clearer because you could have a national competition held within Adelaide.
Yes, but if you're in a national competition and it's
Still
held in Adelaide, you can then get some money towards your uniform because you're representing the state at a national competition. So it's not just travel; it's other things. Yes, Councillor Mooney?
Maybe just add, is it worth having some definitions around some of these terms within the policy? Would that provide some clarity?
Through you, Mayor, I think it can become a little too convoluted, but I mean, I agree maybe that the age can be removed. I believe that was in the original policy due to the fact that generally you've got under 10 sporting that wouldn't tend to cost quite as much as your under 16s or your 20 year old. It depends. The costs of running events tend to go up with age groups. But I'm happy to remove dependent on the age.
Can that be at the council discretion? Council's discretion. And nothing, I just don't think age should be mentioned. You don't want to be considered to be ageist.
No.
Would I just comment?
Yes,
It's at council discretion. I think it's better not to be too specific in any area. In actual fact, I think you can go on adding clause after clause or statement after statement, but really at the end of the day, every one of these applications comes before council and it's at our discretion. I mean, I think we're probably being a bit pedantic about the detail.
You could easily say for individuals, funding amounts will be determined by council, full stop.
Well, I mean, that would be better because it removes any issues of conjecture around why have we applied it to one person and not to another. So.
Yeah, Your Worship, I know Councillor Watkins wants to speak. I think that's what you currently have, and what's precipitated these variations that Fiona's putting forward is the conversation at the last community fund applications that you resolved, where Councillor Ashby actually said, we keep giving to $150. You know, you can't even get to the airport. In fact, if I can quote you correctly, you wouldn't even get to the airport. We need to think about this differently. We need to be a little bit more broader with how we apply the allocation of funds. So this was an attempt to try and open that up and broaden the conversation, because I think what we're trying to avoid is going back to what it has been. It's just easy to assign $150 because that's what we've always done in the past. So it's just trying to broaden it and open it up a little bit more to try and trigger a proper review of the applications and assigning what should be fair and reasonable amounts of money. How do you do that? I don't know.
Sorry, through you, Mayor. Don't get me wrong. I think the intention's correct. It's just I think in there there's at the moment there's too much stuff that could be up for conjecture, and I think we're better off tightening that up if we can do that. And even that first line, I've read it again for about the 10th time regarding the memorial heritage plaques. It may even be that putting after the semicolon, putting the word including in might.
So through the chair, basically that's the last part of what does the program support. It also supports memorial or heritage plaques. So that's part of that whole context of that dot point. Purchases that are clearly one-off, grants for individuals in sporting that goes, and memorial or heritage plaques. That is what is supported. And it's not really another dot point, but I understand because it's such a long paragraph there about sporting.
So just including the word including.
Okay.
Would probably do it. To me makes it clearer.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Wilkins. I was reading it thinking I don't think we should put concluding. Go on.
It's really just a point of clarification around that fourth dot point around what does the program support. Are we saying that the travel contribution is limited up to $300 per annum, or at the discretion of council? Because down further it says applicants are limited to one application per financial year, generally up to $1,000 unless determined by council. So it's kind of confusing in terms of, are we saying that $300 per annum is just for travel, or do we say council makes an allocation and how the applicant uses it is really up to them? So do we need to?
Yeah, Your Worship, I think what we might do with council's agreement is if we pull this item, do a bit more work on it and come back. And the reason I also say that, Your Worship, is in listening to the discussion around memorial and heritage, I was just reminded that council's actually resolved to cover full cost. So why would we be using a community fund? So I just think we need to do a bit more work here, Your Worship. So perhaps we could defer this. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder, please.
Yeah.
Councillor Wilkins. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried.
Thank you.
(14.3.1) Behavioural Management Framework. I'm assuming everyone has read this. Are there any questions regarding the information within the paper? Is everyone happy that we just put it to the vote?
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. For option B. Seconder is Councillor Thurland. Does anyone wish to speak for or against the motion? No?
No, not really.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried.
Bit of grumbling there.
Identification of items for individual. We don't have any subsidiary reports. So we move on to 15. Identification of items for individual consideration. So it's 16 16.3.1, Councillor Furlan. 16.3.2,
Your Worship, were you going to pull that one out? The monthly?
yes, that's me. 16.3.3, Councillor Williams. 16.3.4, Councillor Bishop. 16.3.5, 16.3.6, 16.3.7, 16.3.9, no, 8, sorry, I'm jumping the gun here, 16.3.9, Councillor Ashby and Councillor Bishop, that was just the two, yes, I didn't miss anyone else. 16.4.1, 16.4.2,
Thank you.
16.5. Could someone then move that all the other reports? Thank you, Councillor Williams, and seconded Councillor Joshi. All those in favour? Thank you, carried. We move to 16.3.1, which is Councillor Furlan.
Thank you. I just wanted to get an update on, with the debtors, the majority is the Walkerville Sports Club. And I'm just wondering,
Excuse me, Councillor Furlan. That's actually the month, what's 16.3.1, which is you put your hand up for, is the Group Manager Assets and Infrastructure report.
Works report.
And it's the works report. If you don't wish to talk to the report, you want to report to the 16.3.2, that's fine, because I've called that one up. So would you like to move that we receive and note the works report for August 2020? Thank you, Councillor Furlan. May I have a second? Councillor Williams. All those in favour? Thank you. We move to 16.3.2, which is the monthly financial report. I know I did say I wish to speak to it, but you may go first because I think you're going to ask the same question that I asked.
Okay.
Anyway, go on.
thank you. Sorry about the false start. So if I could just get an update on the debtors, being predominantly the Walkerville Sports Club. There's about 44,000 of that, 46.
Excuse me, Councillor Fern, that was the question I asked. And Councillor Dan Scott has all the answers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Furlan. So, with regards to the update, the loan amount that was applied in March of last year totaled $59,000. In accordance with the lease obligations, a concurrent obligation was built into the lease that the club has a requirement to pay their licence fee for the oval, as well as maintaining the ongoing $11,000 payments for the loan a year. If there's a breach in one of those agreements, there's a breach in all three of those agreements. The quarterly payments that are required is $2,765, and there's 13 payments remaining for the course of the lease term, with a final balloon payment of about $8,000. They're ahead of schedule with their payments today.
All right. Thank you. Probably just the second part is around the CapEx spend.
Excuse me, may I interrupt you for a moment? I asked a further question, if you can report, and that is, given that we're upgrading the Walkerville Oval and the club rooms, I asked what happened then to the loan.
Through Your Worship, the loan continues through the entirety of the lease. So, under the redevelopment clause within the lease, council are obligated to relocate the club to an alternate premises for the duration under the same exact conditions of the existing lease term. That includes the requirement to pay the loan.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
That's all right. No, thank you. Just to sort of get my head around the budget spend for CapEx, the way I read it, we've actually spent about 50,000 and we've got 236,000 to be paid. And we're probably, if we split the 3.2 million equally across the 12 months, we're probably about 400,000 or 500,000 behind on the spend.
Sorry, Councillor Furlong, which page are you looking at? My device
is.
connection.
I'm just trying to split the pay, just to try and compare our
Did you want to speak to me?
budget spend of CapEx and how that tracks against our loan. So,
Through your worship, I can speak to some of that, Councillor Furlong.
thank you.
So we've just got our quotes back in for our roads program, which is about $400,000 that'll be committed to be spent in around about January, February.
Okay.
Other ones are going out for quotation at the moment, so I'm fairly comfortable at this stage that we'll be well and truly on track for our spend for the capital program.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was all. Thanks.
If you would like to move,
Yes.
thank you. May I have a seconder? Councillor Joshi. All those in favour? Thank you, carried. We now move on to 16.3.3, which is the Wesleyan Cemetery. Councillor Williams, you wish to...
I'm sorry, Mayor Fricker, I think I've done a Councillor Furlong. I'm happy to move the recommendation and I'll speak after Councillor Bishop in 16.3.4. So,
16 point. Oh no, we've got to get it passed.
so I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. May we have a seconder then? Thank you, Councillor Furlong. All those in favour? Carried.
Become known as a Furlong.
I'll leave that one down.
So it's 16.3.4. Councillor Bishop.
I'm sure James and I are on the same point. The attachment is the incorrect attachment.
Yeah. Unless we're making the cemetery even bigger. On page
Yep.
73, the attachment's the Walkerville Oval redevelopment.
Is
Meaning,
it's the wrong attachment.
well, it says
listed.
it's listed as the attachment being for the.
Which is actually the Wesleyan minutes. Yes.
Your worship, I do apologise about that. It's a clearly clerical error, but the date's correct, is it not?
That might be a copy and paste.
That's right. The dates.
The date is correct, which is odd.
Did you wish to say anything else?
No, it was
You want
just
to
that
say?
this has to be tidied up.
Yes and no, but I was also wondering whether if Scott wanted to give a bit of a verbal on the Wesleyan Cemetery as well, if that's appropriate given the discussions at the last meeting and the plans. So.
Your worship, just on that, you may add further if you wish, Councillor Williams. There will be there's a large body of work that needs to be done before this comes into the chamber. That will be done for the October meeting, but the general consensus of the committee, as you can see from the recommendation, is that they're going to make the recommendation to council to proceed with burials on the site, allocate a certain amount of funding for next financial year, so we can start stage 1 of the project. Enter into a 3-year contract with ACA for the ongoing management of the site, as well as starting a required consultation process for previously used cemetery sites in the cemetery itself. Did you want to add anything further, Councillor?
No, not really. That's pretty much a brief because I don't want to preempt. Obviously, what comes back to council, only to say that the feedback that I've had from a lot of people in the community over the last, probably over the last couple of months, the amount of people that are now going through and looking through the cemetery and saying how good it is really should be a compliment to staff and administration and probably to council as well for committing the funds and particularly getting to a point where there's an opportunity now after a couple of years of work there's an opportunity now the cemetery is in a position to hopefully fund itself so that it becomes better and better at essentially no cost to the ratepayers. So for me, if it keeps proceeding this way, it's a great outcome. Thank you.
Would you like to move?
Happy to move.
Seconder, Councillor Bishop. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you. Carried. We now move on to 16.3.9. Councillor Ashby and Councillor Bishop called this out, which is the suburban boundary realignment. Thank you.
Yes,
Ashby.
it's probably premature, Your Worship, but given that the final results of the consultation are not in, but I might be at the next meeting. And I just wondered whether you'd allow me to make a couple of comments. And
I'll let you.
thank you.
I'm very generous tonight.
Thank you. I note that there are 35% of the responses tabulated to date are in favour of the status quo, as opposed to about 65% that favour some sort of change. But of that 65%, there doesn't seem to be terribly much agreement in the three options. And I am very much afraid that if we continue down the track we're going to end up with a real can of worms. And there's a lot of adverse comments. I only got to 500 and something this afternoon. I didn't get to, apologies, but I didn't get through the whole lot. But there is a bit of a theme running through the comments that I read that says why you're doing this and why there is no justification for doing it at all. We haven't been presented with any information in relation to the reasons for actually going out for consultation, and that hasn't been presented to ratepayers or residents. And there's a bit of sceptical content there in terms of what's council up to. Well, I don't give much credence to that because we're not up to anything. We're just responding to a resolution from this council. So yeah, I'd urge a lot of caution as we go forward of this particular issue, because I think everybody that I've spoken to, and I know I represent a different demographic age group and everything else, but I get a lot of very unfavourable comments as to why you're wasting council time and money on this particular project.
Thank you, Councillor Ashby. Councillor Bishop, you wish to comment?
Yes, I do. My comment is that I hope we can divide it out to the people in the triangle, because the opinions of Medindi, unless the Medindi people own land in the triangle, are not relevant as far as I'm concerned. So I think that it would be nice to be able to weight the votes, because first of all, I think the triangle, followed by the people of Walkerville, followed by the people of Vale Park on the eastern side of Ascot Avenue, and I actually don't think Gilberton and Medindi should have an opinion at all, because it doesn't affect them at all. So the people whom I have spoken to in Vale Park and the people I know are really enthusiastic about it. That's all my only comment.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, not to preempt anything, and similarly to Councillor Bishop, I think it would be good, and once the report comes back, obviously we'll look at it and make a decision then. But even if we were able to be drill down and go out to the people in the affected in just the affected area, and ask about their desire to change to Walkerville, because that's what a lot of this seems to head back to me. It seems to be that the only real interest is around that particular area. But let's wait until we see the results and then make a decision. That's been my pattern of thought today, just to share it with members.
Councillor Wilkins.
Thanks, Africa. My question was really in regards to, I guess, more statistics, right? Because the population of Walkerville, suburb of Walkerville, may be different to the population of Vale Park, and whether we actually need to normalise the responses and the percentages we get back. Bit similar to what Councillor Bishop was saying. And then I'm not sure, and I can't remember, the questionnaire was there and I should have had a look at it, but when you answered if you were in favour, did that only trigger what question 2 was? Because I found it funny that 4% said no, they weren't in favour, but then only 33% said no change. Like, it was just a bit strange that the numbers didn't add up. And from what I recall, if you said yes or no, you still got the option to choose one of the alternatives. So whether that no change, does that get taken out because you said no to start with, or anyway, it was on those things. It's
Through the
probably
chair.
statistical.
It didn't. If based on what one you selected, you could still go on and answer
Yeah.
the next question.
Yeah. Okay. So just wanted to give that consideration. I guess a bit what Councillor Ashby was saying, that there wasn't a lot of alignment, but I guess if you took out that portion of that you might be a bit clearer.
Thank you. We'll wait for the more detailed
Results.
response.
Your Worship, just before you seek a mover and a seconder, a couple of comments if I could make. In response to what did we notify the community, the decision of council was via a motion. There was not a lot more, with all due respect, there was not a lot more thinking that went behind this. So the community was notified. The community was notified. The community were told the reasons that council was doing this, and it was driven by a motion that was presented by I think it was Councillor Bishop initially, and then it was administration coming back to you said, look, if you're going to go out and ask the question, give them some options to consider that. So that's the beginning and the end of the discussion around why council is doing this. Firstly, secondly, the end decision will not be council's. So council will simply determine, based on the final feedback that we get and your observations and your consideration, as to whether or not you seek to approach the Surveyor General and ask the Surveyor General to conduct a full survey, a full research as to whether or not a realignment should occur. So there'll be another process on top of this process, and potentially I think it's going to take us close to, from beginning to end, 12 months before we even see anything. At least, 12 months. Yeah. And I think the other comment that I really wanted to make is how great has our response rate been, members? I mean, this is astronomical.
We've hit a spot.
This is a record, an absolute record. 1,320 survey responses.
And sorry to interrupt through the chair, just on that, with the ones we have left to count and the ones that are sitting on the desk that came in late as well, it's probably close to over 1,800.
There you go. That's absolutely phenomenal.
Yes, Councillor Nicky.
So just with the extra information, which I think Councillor Ashby was sort of trying to bring to the table, I did raise some questions about school zones and the cost of this exercise, etc. So I did read some of the comments in there saying, look, if we change the suburb, I'll be able to get into a new school zone. But that wasn't the case.
That's
so
right.
that's I think we need to put that to bed, that people are aware that that's actually not going to happen. So the catchment area is the catchment area, so it's not going to change based on suburbs. So I am a little, to be honest, a little bit confused. So what is the next step from here? Well, where do we go?
So Your Worship, and I'll let Sarah speak, we're still formulating all the responses, so there's still a lot more that have come through because it's been a manual exercise. So those who filled in SurveyMonkey online is fine, but then we received a horde of paper-based survey responses, so they all have to be entered into data entry. So once that's all done, and so then once it's in the SurveyMonkey template, Sarah will be able to manipulate the data and pull out exactly what we need, so we can have a clear understanding of how things have panned out, where they end up. So the next thing from here is a formal report into the chamber, and it will be a decision report providing the outline of all the survey responses and as much of a statistical analysis as we can muster, accepting that there's going to be, plus or minus some errors, only because of the way that the SurveyMonkey operates. And it comes back to the previous conversation around, if you answered that one, do you still get a chance to answer that one? So it's about how we sort of dissect the data so that we can have a better understanding of it for council's consideration to decide whether or not to go then to Surveyor General and say, please advance.
Okay, so the recommendation for that report would be to take it to the Surveyor General? Okay.
If the data holds up, and that's the position of council. So, I mean, we haven't arrived at that conclusion, but just based on this preliminary indication, it suggests that is the way to go. But I've just forgotten the Surveyor General's criteria.
Yeah, through the chair, he says a majority has to be in favour, and from our understanding of that, it's probably at least 80% or more for him to consider that. So we're not quite at that. So
unless
yeah.
there's a 100% of
Yeah.
whatever comes in. Yeah.
And is that 80% of the whole community? Have we had, because we might need to get some more sorry, Scott.
Yeah, so through your worship, that is correct. So it'd be 80% of the people of the responses from the survey that are received. So if I can remind elected members, the initial motion was predominantly about testing the waters,
Yes.
seeing if it was feasible and engaging the community's interest, which is what we've done through this process. You can see that while it may not be an absolute majority, there's a majority that are in favour of some form of change. As the CEO was mentioning, a subsequent report, a very detailed report, will come into the chamber next month. Then we'll start the discussions with the Surveyor General about moving forward. They will do a significant consultation in conjunction with council, both township-wide as well as potentially opening up to the state for commentary as well. That process can take, from start to finish, as the CEO said, 12 to 18 months in total.
Yes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Fricker. I also have a few questions, and I'm not going to go on too long about them now because I think it's something for me to bring up at another time around the integrity of the data as well. And the reason I bring that up is, and how we go about measuring the surveys. For instance, do we have one vote per property? Can everyone within that property vote? If there's 5 people living in one house, can they all vote in one manner and one person living in another only vote once? Do we use rate notices to make sure that the people that are voting are the people that actually live within the area? Do we use IP addresses so one IP address can't vote on multiple occasions? So I have, as much as I believe this is still preliminary at the moment, I think we need to seriously look at the results that we get back and tightening up some of the controls around how we get the data, because I'm assuming, I don't know for certain, I'm assuming that people from outside of the area could vote by going to the QR code or going to the Survey Monkey, and that once again multiple people within one property could vote instead of per ratepayer. But another interesting point there is, I know a family that lives in the area who have elderly parents who disagree completely with the options. One believes they should stay in Vale Park, one believes they doesn't, so that they shouldn't. So how do you monitor that? But it's a broader conversation that needs to be had around the integrity of the information that we get, because it could be used. If someone had a particular agenda to push, they could have people, I believe they could have people from outside of the area vote.
We're not contemplating a vote though, are we? Sorry.
Not yet, no.
Well, answering the survey, I mean.
Or more detailed responses to come in before we go any further. Which is going to be...
Just for clarity, just back on what Scott said, you're saying, sorry Scott, that it could be other people out of Gawler.
State.
That's
correct.
Your wishes, that is correct.
Any logical reason?
I couldn't speak to that at this present time because that's the process that the Survey General takes.
So I find
they'll obviously be waiting to the township and the responses from those within the township, but like most state government consultation processes, it's open to a certain extent of the state.
It's out of our hands, Councillor Yankee. Would you like to move Councillor Ashby or Councillor Bishop that we accept that? Well, thank you very much. Seconded Councillor Ashby. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. We now move on to 16.4.2. Councillor Williams, you've called out the recycling contract. That is the right one? Sorry, I had to say that.
No, fair enough. I thought Councillor Furlan might have had a shot.
You got it right.
The only reason I brought it out was I know Carly, and having previously chaired WAG, Carly, and in the Walkerville News, it's been great, a lot of tips that have been coming out around recycling and rubbish and everything. And just a comment, perhaps if Carly or whoever's doing it next time, is if we could perhaps set a challenge. It's interesting to see that our organics collection was 1,087 tonnes, and our residual collected waste was 1,210. It would be great if we could do something to advertise in the next thing around. Let's get our residual collected below our organics collected.
Yep.
And do something around advertising that in the next Walkerville newsletter or whatever, and set a challenge and perhaps report back on it and threat. The next time we get these figures.
Yep.
Right. I don't think I need to move anything around that, do I?
So,
No.
would you like to receive and
You guys
move
are
and
still-
receive a note?
Quite happy.
Thank you. Seconded then, please. Councillor Joshi, all those in favour? Thank you, carried. We now move on to the correspondence. Does anyone have any questions regarding the correspondence? If not, would someone please move that it's received and noted? Councillor Joshi, seconder. Councillor Williams, all those in favour? Thank you, carried. Would someone now move that we move into confidence, please? Councillor Ashby, seconded Councillor Williams. All those in favour? Thank you, carried. So we'll now thank you, everyone. We have now moved out of confidence. We're now moving back into confidence to discuss the CEO performance review. Would someone move? Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Second, Councillor Wilkins. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. We now move into confidence. Thank you very much. We've just moved out of confidence. It is now 9:29 and I declare the council meeting closed. And I thank you all for attending.
Very good.
Thank you.